Prospect, Tramp says to me right off. Is it true you hit one of Quickie's hang-arounds? Yeah, but he hit me first, I protested like a first grader. Quickie jumped in with, we should all let the prospects fuck him up. Tramp thought a moment. You know, that sounds like a pretty good idea. Well, that was all Quickie Johnny needed to hear. Wasting no time, he gathered all the prospects he could find for a good old-fashioned ass-whooping. Before those boys could have at me, though, the International P issued a new directive. Now wait a minute, Quickie. All at once doesn't seem fair. Maybe we should have them fight one at a time. That work for you, Prospect? If that's the way you want it to play out, I told him. All right, Quickie, ordered Tramp. Let's take this out back and line them up. The crowd marched through the bar and out the side door to the open yard. Quickie John got to work making sure all his biggest bruisers were up front. It was time for a little one-on-one gladiatorial combat at the Screaming Chicken Saloon, and those poor bastards didn't stand a chance. Throughout my teen years and into my 20s, if I wasn't finding a fight was usually finding me. One night in the town of Winchester, I got into a brawl outside a hamburger stand with 3 men. Whipped 2 of them, and the third ran off. Some dude ordered a burger, saw the whole thing, and suggested I fight for a living. I didn't think anything more of it until I bumped into that same guy at a bar a few months later, and we got to talking. He told me about an underground fight circuit, illegal in the state of California, where bookies arranged bare-knuckle matches. It was cage fighting before the cages, only more brutal. These were 2 men pounding each other toe-to-toe until one gave up or couldn't continue. There were no rounds, no referees. There's $250 in it if you are interested, the man said. I figured, why not? This was at the tail end of my U-Haul bandit days, and I was looking for a way out of the drug racket. I dabbed in landscaping and tree trimming, but not many upstanding citizens were willing to hire convicted felons, so the fight game seemed a sensible alternative. The man jotted down an address, date and time on a piece of paper, and handed it to me. As so began my bare-knuckle phase. That Saturday night, I drove out to a bowling alley in Riverside that had closed for the evening. But the door was open, so I stepped inside to find a small crowd of maybe 40 people gathered under a haze of cigar and cigarette smoke. Right away, I recognized the dude from Winchester, hobnobbing with a group of bettors. He broke away and greeted me with a handshake. As we spoke, I noticed the others sizing me up like a colt at auction. In a moment, the bookie approached, a chubby bastard with a stump cigar between his teeth, a Tupperware tumbler filled with whiskey in his hand, and a stink about him that almost made me gag. There were only 2 rules, the bookie explained. No biting and no poking in the eyes. My opponent was waiting for me in an open space in front of the snack bar where the tables had been pushed aside to create a makeshift ring. The fighter looked to be in his late 20s, a little older than me at the time. I wore a t-shirt, Levi's, and a new pair of Nikes, which I removed because I didn't want to get them bloody. We shook hands, then someone clapped and the match was on. As we circled each other, I could tell by the cheers that the big money was on my opponent. Nobody was giving the new guy much of a shot. I finally got tired of the dance and met the man halfway. He came in close, took a swing. As the punch missed, my foot flashed toward his temple and struck the side of his head faster than he could raise his hands to block it. The kick that cold-cocked my opponent was a move taught to me by my old martial arts instructor, Mr. Lee. I practiced it countless times when I was a kid and countless more as I got older. Dump and kick door headers from a standing position. Broke my toes doing that once. To condition my feet, I walked through parking lots, booting concrete barriers. For my legs, it was broom handles, one in each hand, slapped up and down my calves and thighs. To toughen my torso, I whipped nunchucks back and forth against my ribs. See, the thing about fighting was you had to be able to take a hit. Of course, it was always going to hurt, but if your body could absorb the blow, you were golden. A lot of fighters couldn't handle the pain. I was never one of them. After my opponent was lifted from the floor and got his head straight, the shit stink bookie handed me $250 and another slip of paper. Be at that address next Saturday, he said, and I'll get you $1,000. The following weekend, I grabbed my friend, Magnum, and we drove to Pomona for the next match. Magnum had been a close buddy all through my drug dealing days, a tall meth head who resembled Tom Selleck and didn't seem to know his own strength, like a big baby Huey. Magnum first proved his loyalty when I was collecting on some drug money I'd fronted in ex-con. When the bastard went for his gun, Magnum clocked him. He became my trusted road dog after that, at least until he went to prison and old Joe came along to take his place. My next fight was after hours in a Pomona bar, and this time there were maybe 50 or 60 bettors inside, including the fat bookie with his tumbler of booze. My latest opponent was a monstrous son of a bitch who had to outweigh me by at least 100 pounds. And I'm thinking, holy fuck, now I'm in trouble. I removed my flip-flops and stepped out into the open space near a couple of pool tables. This time, there was no hand clapping to start the match. An air horn sounded and the fight was on. My opponent was one of those lunkheads who throws a roundhouse from the ground up. When he tried that move with me, I quickly kicked him in the ribs. When he tried it again, I booted him behind the knee, and now the giant was limping around like a lame dog. I was faster than he was, much faster. The dude kept missing, and I kept working that bum knee over until he could barely stand. That's when I made a sudden move inside and drove the palm of my hand hard into his face, breaking his nose. That bookie made some money that night. I think he must have cleaned up on most of those suckers in the bar. I kept on rolling from there, and with each fight, the number of bettors seemed to grow a little larger. Now they were calling me Shotgun, my nickname before I was known as the U-Haul Bandit. I used to own a 12 gauge with a 6-inch extension that my brother Keith had machined for me, and I used that gun to great effect. Before I made my reputation hauling furniture for delinquent junkies, I was the guy who blew their doors off the hinges and announced, "Where's my money, motherfucker?" The bank I was making on the underground fight circuit was easy pickings compared to the drug racket. For a minute of my time, I was pulling in thousands of dollars. And that's all those matches usually went, a minute and a half. After 3, both of us would be out of breath, so I wanted to roll up my opponent and get things over with as quickly as possible. Man, I don't know how many bare-knuckle matches I was in. There were scores of them, but for a long time I never lost. That cigar-chomping, whiskey-swilling bookie kept making money off me too. I recall him betting against me just once, and the stinky-ass bastard lost. Despite the big paydays, I began to feel dirty about what I was doing, like some horse stripping on stage as those businessmen jerked off and laid their money down. I was done with the fight game, but Magnum was making too much money and having way too much fun, all at my expense, of course. And it was a big one. It was a daylight match held in the Southern California desert, out behind a bar in the middle of nowhere. I was being pitted against an undefeated bare-knuckle fighter from Louisiana, a dude with a lot more fights under his belt than I had. The money was 5-1 against me. I remember driving out to the desert bar with Magnum. The parking lot was jammed with vehicles, including the Cadillac Eldorado with Texas plates and the classic bullhorns fixed to the hood. Bettors were coming from all over for that one. Nobody recognized Shotgun Roll as I stepped into the bar. So I took a stool, ordered a Corona from the barmaid, and watched money change hands. Magnum left to find a bookie at 5-1. "You here for the fight?" "You here for the fight?" asked the barmaid. She was gorgeous. I wanted to fuck her. "I am," I said, snatching the bottle from the bar before she could open it. "It's supposed to be a good one," she said. "A high-dollar fight. How much you gonna bet?" $3,000, I said, then pried the cap off with my teeth. A little trick that used to freak out my sisters. The barmaid wasn't impressed. "Well, I hear it's going to be a great fight," she said. "Have fun." I finished my beer and walked out the back door. At the rear of the building, surrounded by a crowd of close to 200 spectators, was an elevated boxing ring enclosed by a single rope. My opponent was standing off to the side, chatting with some of the bettors. The man was older than me and just about as tall. His misshapen nose and a roadmap of scars spoke of hard miles. I went over and introduced myself. He struck me as a pretty cool guy, just a barroom brawler motherfucker, come to the bayou to put on a good show and make a few bucks. When it was go time, we stepped over the rope together and entered the ring. A bell started the match. My opponent was quick, one of those fast jabbers, pop, 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 just flashing out that hard right hand. I came back with the kick move that knocked him on his ass. He scrambled to his feet and got busy working my chin again till I put him down for good with a hard blow to the temple using the edge of my hand. I could have put the boot to the man's head as he lay half conscious on the mat. I'd done it before to some of the assholes I'd fought. Shit talkers, I called them. Dudes who thought they were badasses and talked trash. Those were the fucks I put the boot to because I didn't want them asking for rematches. But I wasn't going to do that to this Louisiana boy. Too much respect. Besides, it was over. He lost. I went back into the bar and took a seat while Magnum stitched the cut on my chin. I noticed the barmaid watching me with an amused smile. I asked for her phone number, figuring I'd made an impression. I was wrong. "I'm sorry, no offense," she said, declining my request, "but I think what you do is stupid." After that match, I thought I was going to hang it up and call it a day, but I didn't. Magnum convinced me to keep the good times rolling, talking me into one more bout after another. The money in the crowds were growing, and so was my ego. I was still undefeated and getting cocky. Eventually, I headed for Nevada, where bare-knuckle brawling was above board and sanctioned by the state. That's where the big money was. I was looking at a $25,000 payday. The Nevada match was held in a rodeo arena that still had a bunch of horse and bullshit on the ground. My opponent was a muscular black cowboy, a large man with a fight record as good as mine. But he got no respect for me at all. I walked out, refused to shake his hand, and said, "I didn't know ninjas were cowboys." See, that's the man I was back then, a bigoted son of a bitch who said and did things that still turn my stomach today. Fact is, long before I'd been possessed by my addiction to meth, there was a two-headed beast lurking inside me called rage and hate. I look back now and recognize the person I once was, but I can't fathom the evil in that monster's name. As a young buck growing up in Hemet, I was consumed by those ugly emotions. My little sister, Lynn Ann, still keeps a poem I wrote in high school that speaks volumes about that dark time. Staring out the window as the world passes by, the dark clouds surrender to tears. I cannot cry. Lightning flashes anger, and thunder sounds my rage. My heart screams to be out of this hell-bound cage. My soul cries out and yearns to be free, far from this place. Tears can be had so long before a heart explodes, and emotions lead us down dark and lonely roads. Not exactly Ralph Waldo Emerson, I know, but you get the picture. I was fucked up in the head, and unfortunately for my schoolmates, when I wanted to vent that bile, they were the easiest targets.